Good evening. It is 4 p.m. and I'm calling this work session to order. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to those online. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this special meeting is a policy work session. Director Song is absent and excused from this meeting, and I believe that Director Cook will be online.
Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, and Superintendent Bella. Just received a call from Director Cook. He will be joining on Zoom, so we're going to get that hooked up here momentarily.
Fantastic. The board has an executive session scheduled for 6 p.m. However, if the discussion for the special meeting ends sooner than 6 p.m., please be advised that we will go into the executive session early and at that time. Okay, and with that, I call upon Superintendent Bella to take us away.
Thank you, President Markell. Welcome to the rest of our board members and our team. This is our policy work session today. We're excited to share with you, pick up, I should say, where we left off in terms of the work that I want to say thank you, a special thank you to our board for the work they've done over the past couple of years in terms of addressing policy and updating policy and then the subsequent procedures along with those policies. So again, kudos to you, the board, for the work you've done thus far, and we pick up that same pace today. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Holly.
Good evening or late afternoon, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry, Ms. Santello, and a partridge in a pear tree. We'll have the PowerPoint up in just a minute. I want to talk about the fact that we are a policy governance district. I'm not sure if Mr. Cook or Director Cook should be on any moment here, but I wanted to go back through this just to refresh everyone's memory. We're a policy governance district. The school board approves policies that provide general principles for guidance. The management of the district and the superintendent with his administration develop the guidelines or the procedures to implement the board's policies. Policies are broad and general. Procedures can change to improve and also offer more detail, sometimes even including step-by-step processes. The board's collective philosophy equals the policy, and the staff operationalization of the philosophy equals the procedure.
Can I just, I'm sorry, just to
Sure.
clarify that.
Yep.
Just to make sure, when you say that procedures change, of course they will always be in line with the policy if the policy hasn't changed.
Correct.
But maybe I think about at one time, you know, when we say that we're notifying people, that maybe the procedure is that we notified them by sending it out by mail, but now we can send it out by email or something like that. Like our notification hasn't changed, but how we do it
How we do it,
and
correct.
that's what you're referring to in,
Right.
in the difference of that procedures change, but always keeping the policy
As the guideline.
Perfect.
And really implementing what the board wants, but showing direction for that to the staff and for the community to know.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You bet. I gave an example of a school fire drill that the policy would be all schools in the district will hold monthly fire drills. That's very basic, very general, but the procedure would be that teachers with students in their classrooms will exit through the door closest to the classroom shown on the map. Staff members not teaching at the time of the fire drill will exit the building via the nearest door and then help supervise students once outside. Attendance of all students will be taken once exiting of the building is complete. You can see a big difference between the policy and procedure. By the way, this is not one of our policies. It's just an example given. So you can see the difference between very general and specific direction and the difference between policy and procedure. I'm kind of going over this more for the benefit of our new board members, but you know, it doesn't hurt to go over it again. We can pull it back up. Okay. I wanted to go over again, as I do at every meeting, the policy classifications. And I want to talk about WASDA for a minute. We talk a lot about WASDA model policy, so I think it's worth mentioning that the Washington State School Directors Association, or WASDA, is a nonpartisan state agency. It gets its legality through Chapter 28A 345 of the Revised Code of Washington. It crafts model policy based on law, which we follow. We present it to the board as model policy that has been developed, but with our district's take on that. We would never present anything that's model policy that we aren't doing. Membership consists of all of Washington's 1,477 locally elected school board directors, serving all of Washington's 295 school districts with over 1.1 million students in those districts. We generally start each policy work session showing the 3 types of policy classifications. I want to again highlight that the different classifications are there and remind everyone that the board agreed to work through the essential policies first. That doesn't mean we don't have other classifications brought forward for updating, but the intent is, given their importance, that we continue to work through the essential policies. After the discussion of policies, we're looking to the board for a consensus so the policy can be moved forward for adoption. There's no actual vote. The president calls for a consensus. We move it forward if the board wants to, and if not, we bring it back, as we saw with one policy many, many times, if the board isn't happy with how it's progressing until we get it the way the board wants. In October 2022, the board agreed that it was important to work through the essential policies first. And since September 2022, the board has worked to update a total of 63 policies so far. So, pretty good number. Okay, we're on to the first policy, which we will suggest be retired. It's policy 3423, suicide awareness and prevention. We have duplicate policies, so it's being proposed that policy 3423 be retired, as we have policy 2145, suicide prevention. We good with that? We have another policy that takes its place already. Good?
Any discussion?
Okay.
Retire.
Next policy is 3122. Excused and unexcused absences. This is a first reading. You can see the date on there. It looks like KSD revised this policy very recently, but the changes that were made in August of 2023 were only to do with changing language from emergency expelled to emergency removed. In this latest update, the definition of absence changed from remote learning to synchronous and asynchronous instruction. The term remote learning has been removed entirely from this policy. Additionally, the types of excused absences were updated to include mental health symptoms, behavioral health treatment, and students' lack of necessary instructional tools, including internet access or connectivity. Tiered responses for student absences have been updated as well, including early communication to parents, holding parent conferences, and working to understand the underlying reasons for the students' absences. Any questions on this one?
If I can.
Of course.
So the part that bothered me is there's an interruption in the ability to run schools. And so we start to deal with synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And my problem with it is that's what you do when you have time to set up the process. So you have the notification of staff, and you have the notification of households, and then this is where you go, and then it will follow the school day, so et cetera, et cetera. But all of that requires a preliminary step, which is that ability to reach households. And I'm just concerned that I know what you're trying to do, but the problem with it is this is what you employ when you can't run normal. And so I guess my first question is, how do we affirm that households have been notified that this is what we do? And by that, I mean, obviously, they've already been through COVID and they know that, you know, I should be go to the school the district website and locate the fill in the blank. But I just wonder if we're missing you're mandating this is what we have to do, and I don't want to mandate it until I know everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, no, thank you, Director Clark. I think there's several pieces to your comment, which all are well taken. I think the purpose of this policy is to update what we currently have in terms of how we reach excused and or unexcused for a period of time. To your point about it could be, the impact could be not district-wide, it could be a school, it could be several schools. And so, you know, there are those variables in terms of what might constitute a district to determine that, excused or unexcused. We have a number of ways that our schools do that now, right? I recall when we had one school canceled because of fiber optic being cut and we couldn't run school there a number of years ago. There's no school, so there's no absence, so to speak, there because school was canceled. There are other situations where school is actually being conducted, if you will. We now have online with our Kent Virtual Academy, and so we needed to update our policy for that purpose. And there are pieces in here, if I'm not mistaken, and I know that Ms. Simpson is here to talk a little bit about, you know, the different specifics. However, that's just an example I'll share that has thrown a kind of a wrench into this whole policy and how you determine excused or unexcused when someone is virtual, right? And so that's the best I can give to you right now, but I'll turn it over to our team to talk a little bit more about the specific updates and, more importantly, to your questions.
Well, so to your question, if we were to move to a remote learning platform, there's a whole lot of other preparation work that would have to take place, such as giving kids their computers, making sure that kids have access to the web, that kind of thing. As far as how it pertains to like Kent Virtual Academy, I believe that I put language in there also about it being what's considered an ALE. So their attendance requirement at Kent Lab Academy is different, just like iGrad has a different attendance requirement than traditional school. But if we were ever to go back into a remote setting for the purposes of just regular attendance outside of an ALE, we'd have to follow the excused, unexcused absence policy.
If I can, okay, I could pick on Mill Creek, but that's too easy. So let's go out to Jenkins Creek. And heavy rainfall, collection of water seeps into the building. You don't know that until it happens. And then you're left with, you're supposed to organize so that instruction can continue. In other parts of the district it is. But the washout that occurs right there leads to a myriad of problems in terms of communication with the homes. And so I'm just asking, do we need a caveat once communication is established? I don't know.
In that one, if I may, that one is a variable, right? One is, can we conduct school for the whole school or not? That's a question my team would be determining. If we could not, we'd make that determination. There would not be excused or unexcused for that purpose. Okay. And I just share that in that it's moot if we've canceled the school.
Okay.
We still have challenge with how we're going to communicate if it was fiber optic, and there are a number of ways that we do that. We have a lot of cell phones now that are in the locator cards for our kids that we now have, not just landlines. And so I know the schools utilize that, and I'm looking at Dr. Christine Avery, and one of our executive directors for learning improvement, who is well aware of the locator card and how schools communicate with their parents regardless of the situation. That's how they do that. Christine?
Before we go on, can I just say, we don't take it though lightly that we have had water issues with Mill Creek and that they are greatly being taken care of and
Yes,
a
they
very serious problem. So we recognize that, and we know that there are many people working on that, and
Yeah.
it is not a foregone conclusion and will be corrected.
That's right.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
I don't think I have anything to add based upon what you've said, Israel. But I do believe that this policy is aiming to clarify expectations around excused and unexcused absences occurring on a daily basis, right? Sherry?
Yes.
So the scope of it is very intentional for daily attendance reporting mechanisms.
Versus closure of a school.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Sorry.
I did have a question. What I didn't notice in here, and tell me if either it's not, if these are somewhat prescriptive by the state, or we have a very large district, and what may be safe in one area may not be safe in another area. And so we leave it up to our families to determine if it is safe for you to travel. And so if it is, particularly icy, the district is a 2-hour late, or, open, whatever that looks like. But for you, it is unsafe to travel. What I'm not seeing in here is that listed, and how would that be handled?
So what we have listed is the state excusal reasons within the law.
Okay.
So in the circumstance that you're saying, there's also written that principal discretion piece around, that type of incident where a family doesn't feel safe to travel because of weather. I have not seen our principals view that as an unexcused absence when there is a weather circumstance.
Okay. But then the protocol would be that it would be unexcused until the principal changes it, and then potentially schoolwork wouldn't. This is where I really see the rub end up being, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is it tends to be with probably our older students, our senior high students that are, that they can't make up an assignment because they weren't in class there to do it. Mm-hmm. And so it goes on a final transcript and things like that. So
I feel like transportation is within the excusal reasons, but I don't have the language in front of me.
Yeah, and I'll pull it up. I do have it.
I only saw transportation coming up when it was under the Part B, which is an emergency school facility closure. I did not see transportation, but if I missed it, my apologies.
Yeah, the absences due to, on the list, suspensions, expulsions, there's a list of absences due to student safety concerns is listed in there. That could be a whole host of things that would come into play.
I'm sorry, what number is that? Because I remember safety concerns was
looking
particularly,
at-
that was about bullying.
I looked at my glasses here.
Including absences related to threats, assaults, or bullying. So that doesn't mean, but excluding all others. So it would probably fall into that category.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you very much for the clarification.
And the list is up there if you want to take a look at it now. Family emergency, many, many things on there.
Thank you.
That question. Yeah, it was item 3, and my question here is self-proclaimed religion versus established religion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, could you explain that?
Well, if it's Yom Kippur, an established Jewish holiday, then we know what we're talking about. But given various loosely formed religious groups that sometimes establish their own important dates or whatever, do we actually draw a line?
We do not, that I know of, unless it's something that we have in policy.
I actually reached out to OSPI about this question last year. So there is a point where we look at excessive excused absences and we make sure that we do a contract with a family if we're seeing that it's something that's excessive, like every single Friday we have to take an absence because of this. We do allow it, but we make sure that we have that contract with the family and that we're talking with the family about, you know, this is what you need to stay on top academically because they can't they can't fall behind because of a religious purpose. They need to stay on track with those academics.
Yeah, regardless of the absence, if it's excessive, is what Ms. Simpson is saying, it still impacts their education. As far as us determining whether this is a religious holiday, we're not going to go deep in and ask that. But if it's impacting them, we definitely would. From the other perspective too, you think about if a child is going to be gone X amount of time, again, it's excessive. And if it's over a period of time, testing takes place, those kinds of, it's still something we have to address, so, because it's excessive.
I mean, I just want to add to that, because as a Muslim, every Friday, we go to the mosque.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, that came up several times. Community came to me and said, we want the kids to attend prayer. And we talked about it, and I'm like, it's considered tardiness because it is not a holiday. It's not a considered holiday. So they have to figure out different ways to make sure that the kids are attending school and making up the work.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Therefore, the kids can attend. Also, during Ramadan,
Mm-hmm.
Muslim kids have to take tests while they're fasting. So that's another disadvantage for Muslim kids that are fasting. And so you're right, it's, you know, it's not a small group, it's a large group in this district. So we probably have to figure out ways to make sure that those kids are also given a leeway for that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not taking a test when they haven't had water or anything to eat for.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a good example of what I think our principals work closely with our families in order to make sure that if there's an impact, that we're doing everything we can to help that student be able to, one, participate if they can, two, if they can't, how can we help them still keep up with the learning? And those pieces, I know I'm very familiar with that in terms of allowing for what are other ways we can work with the families. And so that's definitely, I know, goes on in our district. So,
Reading through the policy, religious or cultural purpose, including observance of a religious or cultural holiday or participation in religious or cultural instruction.
Right.
mm-hmm.
So it feels like that's fairly broad.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I meant when I said.
Yeah, I was just
Yes.
wondering if
Right.
do we feel like that's broad enough to?
And that's what I was trying to respond to.
Yes.
Director Clark. You know, it is not recognized, but it is something that a large, you know, kids really have that.
Exactly.
So,
Yes. Good point.
maybe I'm missing it, but if we can go to where it says tardies and disciplinary action.
Back in
In the
excused
policy,
absence.
yeah. I just need a clarification. It says students should not be absent if they have been suspended, expelled, or emergency removed pursuant to chapter. So I'm just trying to see if they are expelled, they're going to be absent. Am I missing something? Does that make sense?
I'm pulling it up here. Let's see.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is an error in language.
Right?
Down more?
Go,
Director
yeah.
Farah?
Down more.
Down more.
There we go.
No, keep going. Keep going. Right there, number A. Tardies.
Yeah.
It's not considered an absence, right?
Yeah,
Right.
it's not,
Well, then also, isn't it because the change in the laws around
Right.
suspensions indicate that you need to be able to access academic services during your time of suspension?
Oh,
So the expectation for students on a suspension is, whether it's, short term, there's work that's being given to them to do in the time that they are off, and that goes for, long term as well.
and expelled?
Yes, we
Yes.
still have academic
We
services.
still have, okay.
Yes.
so the other thing with that is, within this, it's
Right.
towards a truancy petition. So an
Right.
absence for being expelled, suspended, should not go toward a truancy petition, and so that's
That
what
is
that's
what-
speaking
okay.
to.
Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other questions on this one? Are we good to move forward?
Ms. Holly,
Yes.
for our directors that are not present today, do you have their notes and we'll bring those up?
Actually, no one provided any
Okay,
comment.
thank you.
Sorry, guys, give me just a second to pull it back up again.
And I do see Director Cook has joined us by Zoom.
I am here, just staying out.
Thank you. Feel free to jump in. I know sometimes it's hard.
A little bit delayed, so if I have a question or something, I apologize if that's like behind what you guys are doing.
I appreciate that. We will make sure to include you, and so you can get your comments in.
Okay, our next policy is a second reading of Policy 5161, Civility in the Workplace. This is being brought back. Board wanted some changes made after reviewing the language. The language about stakeholders extending common courtesy to others, such as saying please and thank you, was removed. Stakeholders addressing incivility when it was observed was removed, and supervisors having an obligation to address incivility when it was observed was added. And those three were all brought from the board to make those changes. Any questions on that one? No?
Director Clark, or Director Cook, my apologies. Hearing no comment, I think we're good to move this
Okay.
forward. Thank you.
Next is Policy 5011, Sexual Harassment of District Staff Prohibited, first reading. Revisions were made to clarify that when responding to formal complaints involving staff, school districts must follow the detailed Title IX investigation process. Our HR department works with Susie Whitlock, the Executive Director of Student Success, who is the district's Title IX Civil Rights Compliance Coordinator, if this comes up. That was the only change made.
And just to remind the board, each district has to have a designated Title IX, I think they say coordinator, but, yeah.
Any questions?
No question.
Director Cook? questions? Perfect. I feel like we're good to move this
Okay.
one forward too. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next is policy 5201, drug-free schools, community, and workplace. This is a first reading. This policy has been revised to define workplace as meaning the site of the performance of work, including any work done in connection with a federal grant. It includes any district building or property, district-owned vehicle or district-approved vehicle, and off-district property during any school-sponsored or school-approved activity, event, or function. Other updates include the requirement that a staff member who is taking prescribed or over-the-counter medications will be responsible for consulting with the prescribing physician to make sure that any medication they are taking does not interfere with the safe performance of their job. They would work with HR if that was the case.
Director Clark has a question.
Yes.
In the next to the last category, notification requirements, last paragraph, such notification will be provided no later than 5 days after such conviction. And my first question is that 5 working days? And more importantly, why is it 5 days and not simply immediately?
I think I'll defer that to our HR team and/or Mr. Brockvogel.
I'm sorry, I was writing something down when you asked the question.
Well, all right, so it says each employee will notify their supervisor of a conviction. And then no later than 5 days after such conviction. And my first question is when you say 5 days, is that 5 days or 5 work days? And the second question is, and why would I even put a number on it? Why wouldn't it be immediately?
On the counting of days, if it's,
Can you?
check, oh, there we go. On the counting of days, it does not say 5 days. So in these cases, I defer to the court rules. And under the court rules, that would be 5 days exclusive of weekends and holidays. So it is working days.
Okay.
And so that's the way I interpret all these policies when there's a timing
Well, all right,
issue.
so they get arrested on Friday afternoon, it's a misdemeanor or whatever, and the judge rules you are. So technically speaking, it wouldn't be until the following Friday they would have to notify us.
Right.
Does it talk about conviction, though?
Well,
Not
yeah,
conviction,
that's what, it's
non-convictions?
not a charges, it's called talking about conviction.
Well, and again, that's why I use misdemeanor. It could be immediate conviction, not necessarily a jury trial.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to go to court.
Agreed.
Right, so it won't happen the same day, it would happen a couple of days after they show up to court. And then they get charged. That's when the days start, after the conviction.
90% of those misdemeanor cases, like all criminal matters, they plead not guilty. And so then it prolongs. They have a pre-trial and that kind of thing. But your question is well taken. It's still the same issue.
Right.
In fact, why wait till conviction? Why wouldn't there be notice of a charge? Because a lot of times in like a DUI hearing, you're going to have restrictions on release.
Right.
No drinking, no this, no that. No contact with certain people, perhaps, and if it's domestic violence. So, yeah, that's a good question. And it's just a policy preference, I think.
So you're telling me it's normal, the way it's worded?
I think it's normal in the WSDA world, and I'm assuming that's a standardized policy, but that as to say that it's not to say we can't modify that, and I think your point is well taken as far as I'm concerned. If an employee, usually the interference with the workplace will be if he's in the drunk tank or he's arrested and held against his will and he can't communicate. That will be part of the problem. The workplace suffers a little bit under those. And we've had those. I've had those in the past at other places.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ray, do you have anything?
Nope. Other than, I believe we use WASDA language as our,
I don't have a issue with the conviction, but I understand what Director Clark is saying, which is, you know, if the person was arrested by being under the influence, why wait 5 days? I mean, that should be automatic. Should be something that we hear about it, and then that person, for example, a driver arrested for DUI, then immediately we have to, right? So.
Yeah, I think we could tinker with that language.
Right.
I also think that this language may conflict with the practice that we have, which is our CDL holders really do report in those instances immediately, and they're expected to.
Right.
So maybe we work through some of
Yeah,
that
we gotta
language.
come up with some other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to recommend to President Margell that it sounds like there's some intersects here from a legal standpoint, from a policy standpoint, obviously procedure, that I think looking at another reading, that my team could come back and take a look, dig a little deeper, because I think that's already the Vice President Farrer, you bringing up, if that was a driver
Yes.
employed,
Right.
what are the ramifications of that versus another employee? Obviously, immediate is, you know, we need to know right away. So let us come back to that on another reading.
Yeah, and I
and
was
take a
going
look
to
at
also
language.
say,
Right.
to include the work days or the number of days.
Yes.
I believe that it's calendar days, but, so that's something we'll look into
Okay,
as
sure.
well.
Yeah, so we'll come back with that one.
Okay, we'll bring it back for a second reading.
And I guess I bring this one up. I completely understand that this is talking about the use of, but we're also adults around children. And so is there anything in here about talking about, okay, hey, I went to a huge rager this weekend, or, oh, I got so drunk. I mean, if I was a parent and I heard an employee saying that, even if they're completely sober at school, I don't want my kid hearing that.
I think that's covered under our appropriate staff-student interactions policy when it
Okay.
speaks of boundaries.
Okay,
We
so
would address it later.
two different policies. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't know how to say that in a better way than giving bad examples.
Point well taken, yes.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll move it for a second reading after we all look at it together.
Sure. And I did want to still make sure that Director Cook, if he had any
Yeah.
other
Yes.
comments, so we can make sure that we're
Sure.
looking at other issues. Seeing nothing, we will move it forward to, or move it for further discussion.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Director Clark.
Sorry, I don't have any other questions, sorry for the delay.
Oh, no, you're doing great. Thank you so much. Other than I had to hear myself speak, which is terrible.
Big delay. Okay. It's not opening, sorry, give me a second here. Okay, we're on to policy 2005, school improvement plans. This is a first reading. And just to point out, this policy is new to KSD, but KSD staff has always been doing the required work that's included in this policy. At a minimum, each school is to have a school improvement plan that is data-driven, promotes a positive impact on student learning, and includes a continuous improvement process. Schools monitor, adjust, and update their school improvement plans, and you hear about them every year. It's now, proposed to be implemented in policy.
Well, but since we're already in practice, isn't there governing language that drives what we're currently doing without this?
Yeah, I would say that there's also federal language, more importantly, that requires it. So to answer your question, yes, there's already language that drives what we do. This now creates a policy new to Kent, which we've not had. So just basically aligns with what we've been doing now.
I'm good.
Oh, so this is just an addition to the federal statute that.
It's an essential policy that we have not had, although we've been doing everything that's been
everything.
required.
Wow.
Do we have it within policy stating that the school improvement plans are available for parents in the community to look at?
I think it's included in this policy that it'll be posted publicly. I don't know. Dr. Avery?
It's not written in this policy that I'm reading with you, but it is practice. It's on our school websites, our district website. It is public facing on the OSPI school report card, all of that.
I feel like that would, it would be something to add to it, I think only continues to make that, right, that strong floor that we will, just for that transparency, since it does affect all of our students.
So you want it added into policy that we will post it publicly?
I would like to suggest it and see if the rest of the directors find that agreeable to them.
Which we do that anyway.
We do.
But we
Yeah.
never, put it in the policy.
Yeah, no, I think that's I'm just rereading the entry to it, be simple to do, but there are also other ways that the school improvement plans can be forward face. And so to give us flexibility, I think we'll look at language in addition to that, so it's broader, because it includes, I think of community that oftentimes, and I'm thinking community-based partners, that are often integral parts of this process. So, yeah, I think we can look at some of that language, come back to you.
Thank you.
So bring it back for a second reading, or Superintendent Bella, make some changes and bring it forward at that point?
I think that it is, the language we're talking about is short, just adding that piece. I think I would recommend we can bring it back to the board for adoption with that language noted on that date, so.
We can
unless you want
put
to see
that
it
in.
again.
I don't think it makes it substantially different.
I don't think I'm good with it.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
Quick question.
yes.
I know there's a wisdom behind it, but why do we only do ELA and math, not science?
The state requires 3 goals, 1 ELA, 1 math, and the third is optional based upon districts.
Right.
We choose on-time graduation as our third goal, K-12, but we certainly could choose to do our third goal district-wide science.
Science, yeah.
That's really up to us.
Right. I'm just, yeah.
Sorry. It feels weird when we're sharing.
I know. Like, give it to
We're very close.
You can share.
Have I also heard, and I'm so sorry if I have this wrong, that some of our schools choose more of kind of a community partnership type of, or family partnership? I want to say, I thought I heard one school talk about attendance specifically.
Okay, that is confusing. Thanks for asking the question. So several years ago, the third goal in our district, elementary did a family engagement goal and secondary did an on-time graduation. In the last 2 years, this is the second year, K-12, our third goal is on-time graduation. However, there are 3 indicators that we track for on-time graduation: attendance, discipline, and grades. So as each school does their needs assessment and drill down, they look for the area that they have the greatest gap to close. And then they write their on-time graduation goal specific to that area. So what you'll find is, in probably half and half, to be honest, The behavior is where they have their biggest gaps to close, and so they have a goal around that. And then the last 2 years, about half of our schools, their greatest area to improve is attendance. So they all dig into the 3 metrics, and they all pick the one that's the greatest area of growth. About 50-50 attendance behavior.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't cut off the rest of your question.
No, I just wanted to know for our own ability to encourage kids to be able to not only be worrying about reading, which is very important. No, I don't want to discount, but math and science also. So adding science.
Yeah. I think the one thing I'll add to Dr. Avery is this has been a federal requirement for districts who receive federal funding, and most all do. ELA and math are those focus areas that without those foundational skills in those 2 areas, hard to apply in all other areas, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why they've been a real focus, and as you heard last work session, we're really doubling down our efforts in our strategic plan under Goal 1, so to build the foundational skills so that we're building the knowledge and skill to be able to, approach complex language that is in science and math. And so I'll just add that piece to Dr. Avery's response.
Director Cook has a raised hand.
Oh,
Director Cook?
he is muted.
There you go.
There he is.
Yeah, so, sorry for the delay again. I just wanted to say that I agree with Director Brock. I think it would be great if we moved to something along the lines of a science-based approach for that instead of the graduation line. But that's all my only comment. Thank you.
Could you repeat that?
So just please correct me if I'm stating your words, just so it can be heard better for everybody, is it was in support of Director Farah and saying that Director Cook would also like to see something with a science base for that their goal, in addition to the math and the reading. And that's his preference on that.
We good to move forward?
I would like to see the one addition, but
If it's possible, would be nice to have, it would be nice to have that as a goal.
Yeah, what I'd recommend, similar to the other one, allowing my team to work on some language, again, that doesn't, it continues to focus on the ELA and numeracy. That's foundational. And the ability to have the flexibility, if I hear you right, Vice President Farah, to also have that as a potential goal within school improvement plans. And so, Dr. Avery, we can work on that and bring back to the board.
For approval?
Yes.
Okay.
and adding in the visibility of the
Right.
goals and
Yep.
progress.
Got that down.
Yeah, perfect.
So there'll be a second reading.
Actually, it would come to them for approval with the new language, and if they weren't happy with it, we would move on for a 3rd reading.
Okay.
Okay, we're on to policy 2106, program compliance, first reading. Up here. Language regarding non-discriminatory access to facilities and services for recognized youth groups such as Boy Scouts of America, was updated to comply with state and federal law. This includes language addressing honorably discharged veterans, sexual orientation, gender expression or identity, presence of any sensory, mental, or physical disability, or the use of a trained guide dog or service animal by a person. Additionally, the use of multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, or similar processes has been included when referencing disciplinary standards and uniform enforcement of those standards.
Hating to ask the obvious question, but the federal government inserted the Boy Scouts of America?
I'm not
That's
exactly sure if it
Yeah.
is, but they've been in, have had a large hand in making sure that that's language is included.
Yeah, I can clarify. This is in line with our non-discrimination statement that we have as a district, and which is in compliance with state and federal guidelines. And yes, somewhere probably, I think about 20 years ago, the Boy Scouts were specifically called out in addition to other youth serving organizations. Not exactly sure how that all played out and why that happened, but when we didn't have it in it, we were told when the state did their guidance that we were out of compliance and needed to put it in. So.
We haven't updated this policy for 19 years.
I
So,
was looking at
about-
1994 on
That's
this
about
one.
the
This
time.
is an old policy.
so, yeah. So we're really just catching up on things we've already been doing, but catching up in our policy.
Yes, that's another example that we've been not discriminating against, but now we're making sure policy is updated.
And our discrimination policy has been updated for some time right now. This is kind of, I want to look at it as kind of a kitchen sink policy in that every year the superintendent needs to really know that all of these things are taking place in the district. And you see there's a long list of things that the superintendent needs to make sure is happening. And you see that they struck a couple different places, things out that are no longer required either by state or federal law, like the No Child Left Behind and those types of things. So what was in place at one time is no longer here, so those were taken out, and then just tweaking of the language of what we needed to add in.
The question I had on this one when reading it was the L, I think is renumbered, about making sure there's equality among schools and teachers, administrators, and auxiliary personnel in equivalence in the provision of curriculum, materials, supplies among schools who receive Title I funds. So, to me, that just reads oddly, in that all Title I schools need to be equal, but if you're not Title I, you can be different. And instead of all of our schools, and then I wonder, sorry to add this so you can just answer it all up, how is that affected by PTA funds in certain schools and not in certain schools?
Yeah, so let me tackle the first part, and Mr. Heath can help here. The first part really is what you mentioned about Title I. There is federal guidance that district must follow around rank order, meaning you cannot fund schools that are at a certain free or reduced lunch number and are Title I. You cannot fund other schools more, and they take into staffing and a number of things, by the way. It's not just dollars.
Sure.
It cannot be funded more than that Title I school. So that's called a rank order. And so all of our schools need to make sure that, that we're not doing that with each other too, by the way. It's by school as well. So I'll answer that one first, because
It
that's
seems-
kind of a weird one.
It
but
makes sense,
yeah.
and that's what I think we all want, right?
Uh-huh.
Our schools are all given equal resources, but it feels like it's only looking at Title I schools separately.
It's actually not, it's taking all schools.
It just doesn't feel like it reads that way.
Yeah, well, turn it
Yeah.
over to Mr. Heath.
What this also means is that what they don't want happening in Title I schools that get additional staff is to say, okay, we're not going to give you, so we've decided that we're going to give all like elementary schools one counselor. through basic ed funding. And then we couldn't go and say, okay, actually, we're not going to give you all the Title I schools a counselor through basic ed funding. Instead, we're going to make you use your Title I funds to pay for your counselor. So there's this equivalency of auxiliary staff that they're saying has to be the same across all the district, because Title I dollars are meant to enhance for schools that are more highly impacted. So it's that provision of not being able to swap out and use federal funds instead of the local funds or the state funds.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like, that's, I just feel like the wording in this doesn't particularly say that, and maybe that's just me and how I'm reading it.
Yeah, and if we think of the categorical funding, in this case Title I, it's supplemental, not supplanting what schools would get. It needs to be supplemental. And then the PTA piece, I want to make sure I go back to that. That one, I look to Mr. Eric on this, but my understanding for PTA, it is not part of our general fund, and there are inequities right now that exist with schools that don't have PTAs. For example, there is no funding. So there are inequities in that, but I want to make sure that I'm saying this correctly in that that's not part of general fund, what PTAs would be donating with their fundraisers and those kinds of things. Mr. Eric.
Yeah, there's separate nonprofit organizations, there's like booster clubs, so while they work closely with the school district, they're separate entities. So there are inequities, but we don't regulate those inequities because they're not, governed.
We don't govern those funds, just as similar to certain schools might get certain after-school programs paid for, and another school might not because of certain dollars attributed to them.
Yeah.
The biggest contributors are, see this the most with booster clubs. We see this most frequently with booster clubs and parent-teacher organizations.
Thank you for the question. I wanted to make sure that, I will say this, that there are districts with PTAs, councils that work together to help support schools across their districts. I just don't know many of them.
And someday when schools are fully funded by the state government,
Now
federal
that's a whole
government,
other conversation.
we won't have
yes.
to have
We won't
PTAs
have to
and
do that.
booster clubs, right?
Yeah, I will take this time to say that I know that when Mr. Eric first arrived in Kent, did a lot of work around what he just said, around boosters and things, and I'm talking about, because it's related to those inequities that are out there, to have our students in those schools that aren't able to afford certain supplies or things that boosters are able to do, and that he did a lot of work with his team to make sure that you might recall some of the conversations he's had with our board about being able to make sure that we're doing what we need to help support the education of kids regardless of what school they're in. And so, I just wanted to take that moment to say that. We've been doing a lot of the work over time. And if we don't address things like that, they just keep going on and we perpetuate the inequities by not addressing them. So just wanted to note that.
So the language is clunky, but I hope it was described well. We're good to move it forward? Or Ms. Director Cook?
Director Cook, did you have any comments or questions?
I don't have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Director Clark, Director Para? Good? Okay, good. We're good to move to the next one.
Great. The last one is board policy proposed 1225 school director legislative program. The policy is meant to guide the board, in WASDA's words, in developing its operating parameters for supporting and opposing legislation affecting public education. This entire policy and the process described within is discretionary. It's up to the board if they would like to implement this policy. It is discretionary and totally up to the board, but it would have the board take a collective stand on legislative initiatives.
If I can, Madam Chair.
Please.
It is my opinion, we do not need this policy at this time. And if I can, clearly what they're trying to do is drive a common approach, but WASDA doesn't have their act together. The day that they decided you didn't need a weighted vote model and all 295 school districts are equal, the 5th largest school district, Kent, is now equal to Carbonado without a high school. And the real problem that I have with that is their the General Assembly, and I believe my colleague here had trouble staying conscious during what should have been a 6-hour presentation was basically 12 hours. And the reason for that is the process that they have left in place. I mean, it is very clear that smaller school districts have very distinct needs, which I totally appreciate. But when you go to look at the large urban school districts, which handle the majority of children in this state, it becomes, I have trouble keeping my hands on all the moving parts there, and then when I start hearing about 4-H regulations and Carbonado, I have trouble with that. So my point being is we already have a position that we elect for this, and most of the things we obviously already do. We do set aside time to discuss, and I'll be giving an update at the next meeting. But I am also, I've always been uptight with their inability to really tie into federal legislation, because they have a process set up for that, but it is not well communicated. And until in my opinion, is drop it until they get their act together.
So I understand it correctly. You're saying we shouldn't have the policy, or you're saying we should not elect a legislative rep?
Oh, no, I mean, the bulk of the things that they're
Right, we do
describing
it
there,
anyway,
we
right,
need,
right.
and we continue, and we already elect a person and hold them responsible for it. But they're wiring you into a very specific list of things that you're supposed to do. And I wouldn't mind that if they clean up their act, but very clearly, they can't. And so, we don't have to conform to this every word.
If I may, I saw it a little differently, but, and so I'm conflicted on how we would move forward on this one, but we have legislative rep, that's something that we already do, putting that into policy, I guess I didn't have an issue with. What I had, my issue more was with some of the prescriptive language that was said in here, that we're sending people here, we're supporting this, which may or may not be, I mean, there might be a budgetary reason that we can't send one. It might be timing issue that we wouldn't be able to send somebody. And so that's what I had some of the issue, but I think that maybe we came from 2 different reasons of why, but maybe ended up in the same place, that this might not be the most appropriate time for this policy.
And again, it's discretionary. It was just one that I wanted to put before you to see if you wanted to go ahead with.
I'd be interested, Director Cook, did you have thoughts or opinions on this?
goes.
I'd like to maybe discuss it a bit more. I don't know, probably just table it personally and then look at this at a later date. 'Cause I would like, as Director Clark said, to allow WASDA to kind of get things ironed out first. Because it does seem kind of like it's not quite complete yet.
Yeah, I would agree with where the board is at this point. Looking at this, there are different needs within our state, whether it's WASA or WASDA, and there are different priorities that are presented by the different organizations. By the way, those are just two. And what I do know about this process is that we're all clamoring for the same dollar, if you will, and we're all at different places as it relates to, back to that equity piece. And so I would say, yes, table for now until which time more clarity comes from our legislature and really around where funding is so that we know where to put our efforts. At the same time, too, I think Director Clark, the board already elects for a 2-year term a legislative rep that works in conjunction with the superintendent and his or her team, and is also connected with what's happening in the state and how we might work collaboratively on a specific priority, for example. So I would agree with the board.
Okay, so we are fine tabling this. Should we put this, can we put calendar for a year from now to revisit?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's great.
Sounds good.
That is it for tonight, unfortunately.
It's not unfortunately, it's great.
Hey now.
We did a good job.
We did.
We went through all of the prescribed policies.
We did.
Really amazing.
I would agree with you, Vice President, for that. Starting off with the opening today, kudos to our board, and I really appreciate how we worked through the different pieces around language. So if I think back at our work together, WASDA is a WASDA, it's not Kent School District. And we just walked through one piece that, hey, we have, areas that we want to prioritize for the legislative session. We want to keep doing that. That's true with all the different policies. We make sure that when the law changes, we're up to speed with it. And one thing I didn't say earlier is that even though we know what essential or not, there are some times that we might bring a certain policy forth because it's important to the organization that we address certain things. So we are functioning as a board superintendent governance around policy in a way that we need to, based on the things that are coming at us on a regular basis. So kudos to you. I also want to formally thank our team tonight and those teams that have been involved in our process with policy revision and work, because you see this team here, but there are more people behind the scenes that actually work to bring you these documents so that the board can have a conversation about where they want to go next. So kudos to the team and those who also do that work. So turn it back over to President Margill.
Thank you, Superintendent Vela. Again, I'd like to echo the thanks to everybody here tonight and all the work that goes beyond anticipating the questions that we may or may not come up with throughout the night and making sure that all of the right people are here with the answers. I appreciate you stepping into thinking where we might go with those. So I appreciate that. As noted earlier, if this session was to end early, which I thought there was no way possible it would, but look at us, that we would move into executive session. So it is 5:09, and I am going to call this work session
President
adjourned.
Margill, if you, I think we have some language you might be able to use there at the 6 p.m.
I think I already read it.
Did you? Okay,
But I
good.
could read it again.
Yeah.
And so this work session is adjourned for the executive session, which will be approximately 2 hours. Both Director Song and Director Cook will be absent and excused from this meeting. The purpose of this executive session is to discuss the performance of a public employee, potential litigation, and the legal or financial risks of a course of action.
My question, do you think it is truly going to be 2 hours?
It may not be, and for that purpose, Mr. Bachvogel?
At least an hour, sir.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, see, so my
could
problem
get-
with it is, when you make an announcement,
Yep.
you really should give a target time.
Approximate.
We have an approximately 2 hours.
And we can come back.
Yes.
And extend.
Correct.
So my advice is call it for an hour, and if necessary, we'll come back.
Mr. Bachvogel?
That's fine. I mean, it's acceptable in the special meeting.
Okay.
The big issue on special meetings, as you know, is the notice of the initial meeting itself.
Yep.
There's some wiggle room to act lawfully around that.
Okay, I'm fine with that. And so this work session is adjourned for an executive session for approximately 1 hour. If it extends beyond that, you will
Come back out.
see us back out here, and we'll let you know how much longer it's going to be.
Thank you.
And the rest remains the same. And it is 5:11.
Thank you.
Good evening, it is 6:12. The executive session that was originally planned for 2 hours, we had hoped maybe it'd finish in an hour. We do need to extend it back out to the original plan, which is the 2-hour time frame. So we started at 5:11. We will continue on with the session with an approximate additional hour and looking to finish up just after 7 p.m., around 7:11. And we will look forward to coming back and convening then. Thank you. is 7:10, and I'm calling the executive session adjourned. Thank you.